Let's have a look at old British money. You're probably aware of the modern decimal system of currency used in the UK. It's pretty simple, a pound which is divided into 100 pence. But you're probably a little less familiar with this system. Look a bit historic? Well, it's not that old a concept. In fact, it was in use in the UK until 1971. In the grand scheme of things, 40 odd years isn't that long. Here's the basics. Instead of being divided into 100 pence, the pound was instead made up of 240 pence, with a subdivision in between called the shilling. There are 12 pence in a shilling and 20 shillings to the pound. To make it a little more interesting, whilst the shilling was abbreviated as S, the penny was abbreviated as D, short for denarius, which was a classical coin, and the pound symbol was, well, what it is today. Now, before we go on, here's a little word about inflation. You might wonder why all these weird and wonderful coins I'm about to discuss were needed. Well, here's why. In 1970, the last full year the old system was used, a pound was worth around £13 today, whilst the penny was around 5p in today's money. So an item which might cost £1.20 today was the equivalent of around 2 shillings back then, which is why the 2 shillings coin might have been of use. That sort of thing. You can get into all sorts of tangles trying to actually rationalise why the system was in use, but it was in use, so I'm not going to get into that. So let's begin with the coins. I'm not going to mention every one of them because there were lots and lots of coins minted throughout the centuries, and not even all the ones here I'm going to mention were being used in 1970. That applies to the farthing, the first coin here, a pitiful little coin worth just a quarter of a penny. That's about a thousandth of a pound. It was used until 1960. It did have its own line of farthing coins actually though. There was the quarter, the third and the half farthing, but it was pretty difficult to buy anything with them, so they were all eventually phased out. Next, the halfpenny, pronounced halfpenny. Nothing much to say about that really, still pretty weak to buy anything with, although interestingly the modern 2 pence coin is pretty much the same size as the old halfpenny. Then there's the penny itself, a coin with a little buying power actually. In 1960, a penny had the buying value today of 8 pence. Woo. Tuppence was something of an occasional coin, so straight to the threepenny bit, or threepence. In the middle of the Second World War, threepence was around 50p today. And the shiny sixpence was nicknamed the tanner or the half shilling, and was the whole 40th of a pound. Next comes the shilling itself, which is worth a 20th of a pound, which is why its modern day value is 5p. You might also notice its resemblance to the modern 5p coin as well. Its nickname was the bob, and in 1970, a shilling was around about 66p today. Next is the 2 shilling coin, nicknamed the florin. It was actually the result of an attempt to decimalise the system in the 1840s. As you'll notice, its value was a tenth of a pound. The actual decimalisation had to wait, but like the shilling, you might recognise the shape and colour of the florin as that of its modern successor, which is the 10p coin. Up till now we've stuck to whole values of pounds and shillings. The next one not quite so. That's the half crown. It was worth 30 pence, but that's more easily said as 2 shillings and sixpence, or colloquially 2 and 6. That's how you'd actually say shillings and pence, and when you write it down, you'd say 2/6, like I've got there. It was worth an eighth of a pound. It was a pretty useful coin. In 1970, its value was equal to around £1.50 today, but in World War II, if you had a half crown, it'd buy you around £5 today. So you can see why these coins existed. There was also actually the crown itself, but the crown wasn't as used. It was 5 shillings, so a quarter of a pound. After a while, it generally became more of a commemorative coin, such as in 1965, to mark the death of Churchill. Like I said, there were many other coins with values here and there, like the double florin, the precursor of today's 20p, and the guinea, with the unusual value of 21 shillings. That's a pound and 1 shilling. One possible reason for its existence, I've heard, was as a form of interest repayment. If you lent someone a pound, they'd pay you back a guinea, and that extra shilling you'd earn was the interest. It fell out of use in the 19th century as a coin, but it's still used, actually, when quoting prices, at the races for instance. You might have heard it. And then there's actually the tuppence, which I mentioned briefly earlier. Buy 2 bags to feed the birds with it. Now, the notes. The smallest note was the smart-looking 10 shillings. That's worth 50p. In 1971, this would actually buy you around £6 worth of stuff in today's money. And then there's the old pound note, which was actually worth around £12 today if you had one in 1971. After decimalisation, it existed in England as the decimal pound note in the 80s, when the now familiar pound coin came along, but they still use the pound note in Scotland, not so in England. There were many other notes, of course. There was the £5 note, the £10 note, the £20 note, but the value of money in the years the system was used made such high notes quite uncommon, really. £20 in 1971 is today roughly around 240 quid, so you wouldn't really find a note of that much value in the average person's wallet. So there you go. That's what you might have found in the wallet of a man in days gone by. You might wonder how people managed, but they just did. It's what they were used to, just like we're used to decimal currency today. Hope you've enjoyed watching this. Thanks for watching.